basically, if someone asks me what I do, I say I'm kind of a fashion journalist, or I kind of write stuff. And my friends find this really annoying. They think I'm being evasive or being coy, or that I'm seeking flattery, that I'm asking the person who's asking me the question to say, oh, you know, tell me more or whatever. But the point is, I actually am kind of a fashion journalist. I don't really know what it is I do. Also, the word fashion journalist seems such an archaic term. It seems so kind of 20th century. And also, fashion journalism is kind of embarrassing as well in some circles. Like, on newspapers, the fashion journalists are the ones right at the back of the room. They're the ones that get to like do the kind of silly stuff, and they're not taken seriously. But the thing is that within fashion journalism, I found ways of writing that I wouldn't have found anywhere else, and I found satisfaction from fashion journalism more than in any other field. So there's obviously something in fashion journalism. I'm quite old, and so I grew up with quite an idealized idea of fashion journalism. This is a copy of The Face from September 1986. And this is actually a really important issue. It's got a major feature by Jamie Morgan and Ray Petrie on Buffalo. I was 12 years old when I bought this, so you can work out my age for yourself. I actually became a fashion journalist in 2000. I was a deputy fashion editor of The Guardian. 2000 was a kind of an interesting year. The website, I think, existed then, and we were aware of it, but it was just that funny thing in another building. And no one had broadband at home, no one had Wi-Fi, no one had smartphones. So we were bringing news. If we were reporting on a fashion show, then that was the news. No one else knew about it before it appeared in print. It seemed that your choices as a fashion journalist were fairly straightforward. Were you a writer or a stylist? And there are actually some people who kind of should be one more than the other, and vice versa. And are you critical or are you complicit? As in, do you say what you really think about fashion, or are you non-judgmental in the hope of getting advertising or being a kind of friend of the industry? But as soon as I started doing fashion journalism, I kind of realized there was a whole other world to it. And also a world that kind of a lot of people hadn't realized was there. Most fashion journalism is kind of like, oh, here's a new bag, it's nice, isn't it? Go and buy it, you know, and it's quite sort of facile. But actually, there's a whole other thing going on with it. And so I was already kind of a fashion journalist because I wasn't really doing that fashion journalism. I mean, obviously, I like nice things, and there is a part of it which is about, oh my God, that's so lovely, and there's a kind of pleasure from that. But then also, there's this whole other world. And I think this whole other world actually implies to all of fashion. It's not just journalism. There's all these other kind of subsets within it. And they are. So the psychology of fashion. I worked on GQ for a while, and I did an advice column. And you'd quite often asked to answer things like, what suit should I buy? And I'd always be thinking, why are you buying a suit? Like, what's your reason for doing that? Like, we live in the age post Steve Jobs and post Mark Zuckerberg. Like, men who are billionaires don't wear suits. What's the reason for wearing a suit? I'm also obsessed with colour and the effect it has on us, and its meaning, and why we wear it, and what colour we see, and whether you see the same colour as what I see. And there's all this stuff going on about clothing other than that's nice. There's a social implications and also societal as well, like the impact of fashion on a wider community. When you go to a city, what is everyone wearing? And not in terms of, oh, they've read it in a magazine, but they're wearing it because someone else is wearing it because that's how the city is. I was in Mexico City last month, and it was amazing to see how everyone kind of wore the same thing. They wore a bright coloured top with jeans. And it seemed like they were finding some sort of clarity within the chaos of their city. It was a look that I haven't really seen anywhere else. It was very specific. And if anyone tries to say fashion is meaningless or irrelevant, I always kind of say to them, well, what do you think of when you think of the 70s? And they probably say flares. Or what do you think of the 60s? They say miniskirt. Like, we define eras by clothing. It just is in the present era, there are many people who deny fashion has any importance at all. So there's always this kind of effect on a body of people. Business of fashion, I don't mean I'm obsessed with the website, the business of fashion, I mean as in the actual business of fashion itself. And there's nothing more grounding when you're writing about fashion and when you're writing about kind of trend pieces or key items to realize that actually there are people behind the scenes that they just see that as units. Like, it's a super murky world, it's super alpha and super strange and kind of really fascinating. Then the environmental impact, which absolutely no one wants to talk about and everyone wants to pretend isn't there. And we're an entire industry of people making stuff that actually probably isn't needed. It's amazing how fashion also falls in and out of love with the environment and environmental issues. There was a time a few years ago when sustainability was everything anyone would talk about. And you go to a luxury brand and they'd show you their sustainable collection. And nowadays you go and they'll show you their exotic skins. Like, it's completely not fashionable. And it's interesting to write about the thing that they don't want to talk about. Then there's also the kind of hidden characters of fashion. Most designers in fashion are total oddballs. And they make the most amazing subjects to interview. But the thing is that most people just ask them the most inane questions, or they're kind of trained to answer the most inane questions, like, who would you dress for a red carpet, or whatever. But if you just say to a designer, how are you feeling today? Then out comes this torrent of stuff, and they just tell you everything. And it's totally different from interviewing actors or musicians who are so trained to talk about life after they've made something. And actually from fashion designers, you get a real sense of the person when they don't realize they're telling you stuff. So I've been very happy to find these things and find a way of writing that involves all this stuff. So I've always been a kind of fashion journalist in that I've never really done fashion journalism. Today, I am actually a real-life fashion journalist in some sense. I'm the men's fashion critic for the Financial Times. So twice a year for 2 weeks, I am a real journalist, and I go to shows and I file copy, and it's great writing for them because they let me write about all these things all in one place. The rest of the year, I'm a kind of a fashion journalist. I don't really engage in fashion in any sort of normal way. I have my own website, which is the world's worst screen grab ever, which is like tells you absolutely nothing. And this is a story I posted last week about the clothing choices of the next 100 men who appeared on my Tinder, and I found this really interesting. I find the way that men wear clothes more interesting, not more interesting, but as interesting as when they're made. And a lot of fashion journalism is about the point till they go, when the clothes go on sale. And actually, I'd rather talk about when they've been bought and how people wear them. But the thing is, this is also recognised by writing. I do it in a very particular way, but it is still some form of writing. And actually, fashion journalism is about to completely change, or is changing already. And this is kind of why I say I'm kind of a fashion journalist, because I'm not sure whether fashion journalism is a thing that us fashion journalists do anymore. Like, is this fashion journalism? This is the Instagram account of Kim Kardashian. And I'm sure to a brand, it means a lot more for them to be on her Instagram, or if they're sniffy about her, on someone more allegedly classy's Instagram, than to have 100 words written about them in a luxury magazine. Now the thing is, I actually love Instagram, and I think it is actually journalism. Like, I find posting on Instagram a form of reportage. I love writing 20 words and formulating those 20 words to explain what I'm doing, and that's it. Like, it doesn't have to be a long piece to be journalism. So actually, I'm happy to be kind of a fashion journalist because I don't really know what fashion journalism is, and it won't be the same thing in 10 years' time. Fashion is about change, and everything is changing. So I'm kind of a fashion journalist, and that's 10 minutes.